Good afternoon, everyone. President Obama is about to end his visit to the Lakeshore in northeast Wisconsin. Good afternoon. I'm Tom Higgins, joining you with this special report. You can see the presidential motorcade that is arriving at Austin-Straubel Airport in Ashwaubenon. The president about to board Air Force One, scheduled to return to Washington. Visit about an hour short, primarily because of what we're expected to experience, a storm on the East Coast. We're having some interruptions with our signal from Austin-Straubel. We'll go back to it as we can as the presidential motorcade arrives and as the president embarks from northeast Wisconsin on Air Force One. There you can see the plane on the tarmac and the motorcade pulling up to it. The president focusing on northeast Wisconsin the day after his State of the Union address, focusing on northeast Wisconsin and several businesses in the Manitowoc area as examples of those who are using innovation, have also used grants and production incentives from the federal government to grow their companies. Orion Energy was where the president spent most of his time today, a high-tech lighting systems company. He also visited very briefly Scana Aluminum, which is an aluminum manufacturer also in Manitowoc, and TowerTech, a company that's been building wind turbine towers for the last 7 or 8 years. The president, part of the White House Main Street Tour program, where often after major addresses, the president will take to the highways and byways of the country to try to explain and to try to gather reaction and make his point about his programs and how he hopes to move the economy forward. The president stopping for just a few minutes, barely 3 hours after he arrived. He was greeted by Governor Scott Walker and Green Bay Mayor Jim Schmidt as he got off Air Force One this morning. And he, as you can see, also received a couple of Packers jerseys from the governor with a number 1 on it and from the mayor with a number 21 on it, and Charles Woodson's notation that we'll see at the White House. The president now getting ready to leave northeast Wisconsin. His first visit to Manitowoc as president, his second visit to northeast Wisconsin as president. More than 6 months ago, visiting Green Bay Southwest High School to also talk about his plans for the economic future. The president striking, in his view, hopefully a new era of bipartisanship in Washington and cooperation to try to get measures passed through Congress. Now that the Republicans are in control of the U.S. House, at last night's State of the Union address, Democrats and Republicans not sitting on separate sides of the aisle, but rather sitting more together in a rather unusual presentation. Again, the president leaving northeast Wisconsin about an hour earlier than scheduled because of what's expected to be a major snowstorm, dropping perhaps an inch or two of snow on Washington per hour and beginning fairly soon, according to our chief meteorologist, Patrick Powell. The president last night encouraging the country to show a single-minded focus on making smarter and more innovative products than anybody else or risk falling behind. The president pointing specifically at China and saying that that nation has invested in clean energy technologies for several years, while the United States has not, and that as a country, the United States has begun to fall behind in that kind of technology development. He says that cannot continue to happen. In Manitowoc today, he referred to Vince Lombardi and talking about the legendary Packers coach and saying that winning is the future, and in Lombardi's words, that there's no room for second place. And so he's hoping to encourage a new spirit of entrepreneurship and innovative technology as a way to grow the U.S. economy out of a recession that has lingered for the last couple of years. The doors to Air Force One, as you can see, have closed. The president on board, and very shortly we'll be taxiing and we'll head back to Washington. Do we have? I thought we had the shot. We can take a picture of the radar and show you what exactly the weather circumstance is in the Washington area. You can see that there's going to be rain in some parts of the area and also snow and even a mixture as a nor'easter moves up the East Coast over the next several hours. You can see the Washington area very clear, but that area filling in rather quickly. Don't know the exact timetable for the flight, but usually it's close to a 2-hour flight to get from Wisconsin to Washington, D.C. So The forecaster is telling the president that he needed to leave a little bit early. So his stops both at Tower Tech and also at Scana Aluminum were not as long as originally scheduled. They were very brief, although he did make appearances, as he promised in his earlier address at Orion, that he would stop at those other two facilities, and he did. All of those are new companies. Orion Energy, the oldest of the three, born about 15 years ago, Tower Tech about 8 years ago, and Scana Aluminum just last year. You can see the president as part of his tour of the aluminum plant for a few minutes late this morning and early this afternoon. Of course, we've had crews in Manitowoc all day. We will continue coverage online as well as on Fox 11 News at 5 and 9 later this afternoon and this evening, so we hope you will stay with us for that. We will stay with it as the president continues to prepare for his departure on Air Force One to return back to Washington. Again, the president indicating that it's up to a great deal to the private sector, but with incentives from the public sector to get the economy back on track. The unemployment situation has been a struggle in the Manitowoc area. Their unemployment rate running consistently above the state average, although pretty much right at the national average over the past year or so. In Manitowoc, 8.9%, the last figures from the state of Wisconsin for that area's unemployment, compared to a 7.6 rate for the state as a whole. So the Manitowoc Lakeshore area has been struggling a bit to get its economy to bounce back. The president using these three plants as examples of companies that have done just that and hope to continue to do that. Among the companies, Orion expecting to add some more people. They're hoping another 50 or so to their 250 employee staff by the end of this year. Scana Aluminum also hoping to add workers in the coming year. And Tower Tech has more than 300 employees now, and the president hoping to encourage the growth of wind technology and hopes that the Tower Tech staff and the services and products they provide will continue to grow as well. You can see the plane taxiing off to the runway. Doesn't take very long once the president gets on board for the engines to fire up and the crew to get the plane on its way. The presidential 747 jet that has been used for a number of years, one of a fleet of 747s, and of course it's only called Air Force One if in fact the president is on board. So it'll be just a couple of minutes before the president takes off for his return flight, expected to take a couple of hours to get him back to Washington. The president, in his State of the Union address last night, again focusing on companies that he says have benefited from the policies enacted during his first couple of years in office, including the grants to provide incentives for the production of renewable energy and the extension of tax cuts for Americans. So again, the president just a few hours removed from his State of the Union address last night. Again, observations made that it was certainly an unusual event with the congressmen and the senators sitting on both sides of the aisle last night, something that, at least in recent memory, simply has not happened. And of course, as you can see behind the president, an indication of the mixed control of Congress now. Vice President Joe Biden, of course, in control of the Senate, or at least presiding over the Senate, which is now still in the hands of the Democrats. Republican John Boehner from Ohio is now the Speaker of the House, as the Republicans hold now a substantial majority in that House. The President indicating that it's now a time to come together to try to get some of the issues passed in the next 2 years that he says will help the economy rebound. A little bit of light snow in the area, not so much on the runways here at Austin, Straubel, and Ashwaubenon, but certainly on the ground near the taxiways and near the runways, kicking up a little bit of snow dust as the Air Force One gets in position to take off and return to Washington. That should happen in just a couple of minutes, and let's just watch. The president arrived 3 hours and 20 minutes ago at Austin Straubel, so that will be the extent of his visit. He spent a couple of hours in Manitowoc and another hour getting back and forth with a motorcade through the countryside of northeast Wisconsin. Of course, the roads are all blocked, and in some areas, people several lines deep waiting along the motorcade route to greet him and acknowledge the motorcade as it went past. Those will be some of the pictures that we'll share with you as we continue our coverage throughout Fox 11 News at 5 and at 9 later this evening, and also online as well. So as the president gets ready to leave northwest Wisconsin, we show you his arrival one more time. The president, with a smile on his face, accepting the two Packers jerseys. As we said, one with Obama #1 on it from the governor, and Woodson 21 on the one from Green Bay Mayor Jim Schmidt. And as we said, we understand that Woodson autographed it with a phrase saying, "See you at the White House," indicating the Packers players' confidence that they will defeat Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks and then have a White House greeting sometime later in the spring. The president also mentioned in his address at Manitowoc that he didn't back down from his support of his hometown Bears and promised that the Bears will get the Packers next year. But he also said congratulations and best wishes in the Super Bowl a week from Sunday. Said he couldn't believe it. He said he received a third jersey. So we're not quite sure what that third jersey was, but he said he just got on the ground. He already had 3 Packers jerseys. So the Oval Office will be full if he decides to put those up on the walls in Washington. Looks like this should be the final turn onto the runway before the plane takes off. Again, for an early return to Washington, trying to avoid a snowstorm that's expected to hit the D.C. area momentarily. Looks like perhaps starting with rain, but eventually, as Patrick Powell said, turning into an inch or 2 of snow per hour, potentially. And they obviously would like to get back before the bulk of that storm hits the D.C. area. They've already been pounded 3 or 4 times this winter. And Air Force One is off the ground, leaving northeast Wisconsin with President Barack Obama on board after his second trip to northeast Wisconsin as president.